someone who actually, gives in to a woman who says, putting these clauses about, you can only have a single wife is not a masculine man in my opinion. Right?
But from my experience, the guys that are getting married multiple times. They're usually in their 20s as well. They're getting married to 3-4 weirdos, and they're weird themselves.
I don't know in any mind of any woman would think that a high caliber man will see her as a first choice, because any man in general is looking for a fertile woman at first. No woman will be satisfied with the man.
Good evening. Today's episode is about polygamy. Now, polygamy is the umbrella term for what they describe as polygyny. Polygyny is when men marry more than one wife. Now, in this country for a very long time, it's been outlawed, and there's been several references to law that outlaws polygamy, or polygyny rather, where men marry more than one wife or spouse in this country. The most notable one was the Matrimonial Act 1973, where it is banned in England and Wales to get married more than once. However, polygamy, particularly with Islam, is permissible, and many Muslim countries around the world do adopt it and implement it, and it's fine all over the world. What we're grappling with here really is we have Islam on one side saying that, yes, you can marry more than one wife, provided that you're just to them and you can afford to be just to them, and that comprises many things. And on the other hand, we have equality and equal rights, particularly in the West. In the West, for a very, very long time, the landscape on gender roles have changed significantly. We have, without me doing the preamble, men and women work, and I think it's a mindset. It's a mindset shift where I'm of the opinion that, they're looking at me now, I'm of the opinion that in England or in the West at large, it's untenable. I don't think it's a viable option. Yes, men dream of becoming multimillionaires, and I think a man's inherent trait is to have more than one wife. And how that translates in a godless society is cheating. And I'm definitely not endorsing that, but that's what men do, instead, because they can't marry, and they probably don't want to marry because of responsibility. And Islam is there to protect women, which is why I think polygamous marriages, to some degree, I mean, there's many reasons, are acceptable. But what you see it translate in the West is cheating, and it's rampant. Now, I've got this brother here, Shaki. All right for me to call you Shaki?
Yeah.
So Shaki is he feels fervent in why he believes that polygamy should, well, hypothetically speaking, right, it's illegal in this country, why polygamy should be endorsed and embraced, particularly by the Muslim communities, since it's permissible for a man to be married more than once simultaneously. Now, Shaki isn't your ordinary man, usually get the sort of conventional people coming out, not doing too well, saying, no, I want to marry 3 or 4 people. He's studied in one of the top 5 universities in this country. He's a biochemical engineer by trade and profession, if I'm correct to say. And really, the floor is yours. Why do you feel so strongly about polygamy?
So I think one of the challenges that I've always faced is that I come from a family of polygamy.
Right.
I come from 3 generations of polygamy. So it started from my great-great-grandfather, and it's come down from my great-father and then my great-grandfather, and then even to my dad. And obviously their generation is completely different, because obviously they're in Bangladesh. And obviously I'm kind of a Western British male with different views, obviously, because obviously when their view in Islamically in Bangladesh, Sharia law is held to some extent, as in it's permissible. There's no kind of restrictions within within Bangladesh. But obviously, when it comes to the UK, such as myself, where I've been growing up in an area where it's kind of, there's different views. Obviously, with my background in terms of when we're going to university and working, there's obviously a very strong view of, monogamy, basically. And I think it's one of those areas where it has always been a bit of a trouble, and always a bit of a controversial topic. But I think one of the things that I've always said is that I've got to embrace my background. I'm not going to be embarrassed about how I've grown up. I come from a family of polygamy. I've got sisters, and they're not ashamed of themselves. I'm not ashamed of it. And to be honest, I come from a very wealthy background in Bangladesh and very big lineage, and I do well for myself. So I think it's important to, well, I embrace my, my family, for my family, and I think it's very important to embrace it rather than stereotyping it and stigmatizing it just because of the UK law.
Okay, so monogamy is a social construct.
Yeah.
And I touched on it on my introduction, and I said that women and men, and I understand why women in countries in the West, particularly England, as we're in England, will be completely or vociferously opposed to a polygamous marriage. And I want to put the Islamic tenet to a side. Just the way we've been brought up and indoctrinated, it's not normal in our country for a man to have more than one wife, or even be in a relationship, which is haram, obviously, but let's go back to Islam here, have more than one wife in this country, because women were not brought up like this. Most of us, you say you hail from Bangladesh, or your lineage is from Bangladesh. I don't also think that culturally it's normal for, even in the subcontinent, so India, Pakistan and Bangladesh, that it's normal for them to have polygamous marriages. Yes, it does happen. And if I may say, before I ask you a question, in the past, polygamy was viable because polygamy was there to serve a need. There was loss of men through attrition. So you had widows, you had men that passed away, so widows, you had men that died during war, and there was a little surplus of women than men. And what's the best way to protect those women and give them justice? And Islam is the answer to it. However, in this day and age, particularly in the West, where women work in equal rights, and the equal rights can be interpreted in very different ways, right? But if we look at it at a very basic principle, men and women work. And I think the crux of why polygamy flourished in the past is because it was a survival mechanism where primarily you had a man, and it's hypergamy, right? So the woman would marry, or that woman's father would give it to a wealthy man just for survival and for wealth. So it was a survival instinct. In this country, you could be abjectly poor or relatively poor. You still don't need to marry to get wealthy. So that was quite a long-winded answer. You're single, right?
Yeah.
And you're quite brave, I think. I'd like to think a lot of men think the way you do, that they're all for polygamy, but they don't have the courage, or I think it'd be quite folly for them to come out and say, oh yes, even if, particularly when they're married, to say, I want another wife, because more often than not, their current wife will leave them. So you as a single man, when you are courting, does this conversation come up?
Well, I think we need to address it from the process of courting, in the sense that when you're speaking to a daughter of a man, you don't talk about polygamy straight away as the initial conversation. You generally talk about if there's compatibility. You find out if there's mutual interest, and then eventually you'd like each other and then marry each other off, right. Pretty much. The conversation of polygamy never comes up early on, because it's not, no man goes in there saying, I'm going to marry 4 wives. Mm. I mean, even though you're allowed to, and, you can dream all that, as a man, you need to be realistic on whether you can actually do it or not.
One thing, though, there is a social understanding between yourself and the girl that you're talking to, that polygamy is not in the question unless you specify it.
Exactly,
Which is why I asked that question.
Yeah, so I think obviously generally that will be a concern for a female. Mm. And if they do ask the question, are you going to marry another woman or not to take up another woman?
Yeah.
My personal opinion, and this is the same as any other prophet who actually had in the past, they don't know. Because, oh, by the way, peace be upon him. The problem is that most men, when you marry, you think about just getting married initially. As you grow older, you gain experience, life experience, you accumulated wealth. That's when you start thinking about your empire, your family tree, and, your status. And that's exactly what happened to Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. We all know he married his first wife, Khadija radiyallahu anhu. And then he was in a monogamous relationship for a good few years, until, I believe, until his 40s, and then wife passed away. And then he started marrying other wives. Now, if you think about it statistically, right, most men accumulate their wealth late into the years, because that's obviously, if you think about wealth, you've got experience, you've got career, you've got wealth. It's all been accumulated, right? So that's how it's always happened. Even to this very day, right now, most men accumulate their value is pretty much late into their years, generally in their 40s to 50s, when they tend to be in like leadership roles or very highly technical roles. I mean, I'm an engineer. I would always expect my value to be up when I'm in my 40s, 50s, yes, because that is the kind of amount of value I bring to a business or any company, and also there will be a level of life experience that I will have. So I think that is where
sorry to interrupt. Are you attributing wealth to having more wives?
There's a correlation. There is a correlation.
Well, in this country, I can see that happening in the developing world. Yeah, all across the world. And if we just put up a slide on women and stigmatization of polygamy. So if you put the slide up, please. If you're saying wealth is a key factor, I'd have to argue in this country, it doesn't work. And my only reason is, if you were in a developed country, yes, you can have 4, and some people even have more, which is impermissible, even in Muslim countries. But in this country, let's put a hypothetical scenario, right? So you're married to your first wife, right? And then Islamically, you don't need permission from your first wife to go and marry the second wife, although you have to be transparent, right? I mean, you can't hide her away, can you? I mean, we will touch on the secret nikah, secret marriage endemic that we face in this country. So you tell your first wife, I'm going to get married to another wife. You've got 2 or 3 kids with her. In this country, more often than not, she will take your property, she will take your money, and you will be seeing your children after getting custody, maybe twice a month. So how does wealth work there? Because wealth doesn't work for you.
So this is the kind of problem we have in this country, right? Because the Quran has clear, explicit, a guide on what happens during a marriage process, divorce process, financial wealth. Everything is very outlined.
Yeah.
And there's obviously a clear indication that people are not following those strict guidelines, right? And obviously, one of the biggest problems in this country specifically, and they have outlined it in the legislation of marriage acts, where one of the biggest benefits to marrying, specifically in this UK, specifically for females, is wealth. Because when you marry, because it's legal, when you marry, obviously it becomes legally recognized within the country. Once it's legal, then there's a level of wealth there's a level of transactional wealth taking place, as in the country allows the wealth to be treated equally as, equal for both partners. Now, from an Islamic perspective, that's obviously not true, because Islamically, the man's wealth is his man's wealth, and the woman's wealth is her own wealth, right? But obviously, as I've already highlighted, that's not the situation, because the way the country's built and the way they've done the law is just not fit for the way Islamically has been done, and that makes it a big challenge in this UK for people who want to carry out polygamy.
So you want to have more than one wife if you can?
Well, I wouldn't say I want to have one, but I would say I would keep the option of having more than one wife. The reason why I say that is because, there's a lot of pressure for a man to, sustain a number of wives, as you've already highlighted. There's mental health, there's wealth, there's a lot of issues that are related to it. I mean, like I said, I've spoken to you. I've got a lot of sisters, I've told you, and I've lived with a family of sisters, basically, and my mum. And you can imagine females, ramble a lot, and you should. And I've been told by my mum not to argue with women, because it's almost like fighting a war, basically, right? Because a lot of females because men in general don't like to argue, just generally, right? They just like to peace and quiet. Females can ramble all they want.
What's your point here?
My point is, when you're married, right? There's a massive challenge for a man to put his masculine stance on his view on polygamy.
Right.
It's natural for a woman to say, I don't want to go into polygamy, right? But historically, all the masculine figures we've had historically, as in the prophets, the kings and queens, which are well known, right? We can all pretty much say they're all masculine figures, right? And I mean, there's no doubt about all the prophets being considered masculine, right?
Yeah.
If we say
you
right now,
you don't need to. The thing is that my point is this: even at 2025, in developing countries, you don't need to be masculine to have more than one wife. In fact, you don't even need to be good looking. I saw a clip the other day, I think it was in Afghanistan. He had an old man, he had about 30 wives. And I think it's a social construct.
Yeah.
And in our country, we have been socially indoctrinated, indoctrinated to we were brought up in a way through our schooling system, our family construct, society at large, to not be married more than once.
Yeah.
Now, there are exceptions, and what's the term? Bigamy, right?
Bigamy,
where there are people that are circumvent and they get married and not register it. So there may be men in this country, Muslim men, that are married to multiple wives. So that does happen, but that's largely under the radar. But generally speaking, in this country, most women will not be okay for their husband to go and marry elsewhere. Now, the point about in 2025, developed countries and people all around the world that do get married, and until this day are getting married to multiple women, I do largely think it's because of a survival need. Those women are in need to marry just to survive. And also you need to factor in other countries where lifespan is a lot shorter. Men are dying through war or through famine or through some kind of disease. Yeah. Women tend to outlive men, generally speaking. Yeah. Women are widowed there. Women may have lost their husband through war, whatever it may be, or they're divorced, etc., etc., etc. But in those societies, the social construct permits and allows, particularly because they live under the Islamic auspices, to marry more than one. I can't quite see how, even if you are wealthy in this country, you can be, you live in Chigwell, I'm not sure we know what that is, mansions and Ferraris and all of that. I still can't quite see your wife allowing you to marry another woman. Now, that may translate into, if you are sexually frustrated, let's not beat around the bush. And I think libido-wise, men are 10 times more, have more libido than women do. And sometimes when they get to a certain age, when they're in their 30s or 40s, and women are, perhaps when women hit menopause in their 50s, on average, and they're not interested in that stuff as much, men still have the drive and passion, and there perhaps is an argument for men to look elsewhere. But if I think with wealthy men, particularly wealthy men that aren't, and women do it as well, by the way, but wealthy men that aren't Muslim, for instance, so marriage isn't even in their head. They cohabit nowadays anyway. Yeah. But you would see a lot of wealthy men have multiple girlfriends and mistresses. So they will entertain the logic, the concept of having multiple women. They just won't marry them. Yeah. If we bring it back to home here, for Muslim women and Muslim men, because we're speaking about Muslims here, because in Islam it's permissible. Yeah. And I think women, and you have to be fair, and I think they acknowledge that men are allowed to marry more than once, and there are conditions to that. So being just, being wealthy enough, being fair. But I think everything in a woman's fibre that's grown up in the West will be opposed to it. Yeah. They're not denying it. They're not rejecting it. Yeah. But it's their upbringing. And most women will tell you this, I don't care how good looking you are, how rich you are, you can either only be with me or not me. And then if you look at our judicial system or our legal system, if a woman really wants, she'll take half of your property and your kids, and then your wealth has gone to nothing. So that's where we are. Yeah. And I just quickly want to draw your attention to Pew Research here. In 2050, there is a surplus of more women than men. And, if you see 1950s up until 2050, so that's a 100-year span, right? And I think it sort of evens out. It's evening out. There isn't much difference between the number of males per 100 females, right? So if you can see, in 1950, 99.3. Is this, how accurate is this? I mean, Pew Research, they're a credible and reputable research centre.
Yeah, so I looked at the statistics on the UN, and this is partially true. And there is a reason why there's a big fluctuation, right? We know historically and culturally, right, that certain countries, specifically certain families, have a preference towards males compared to females. And as you're probably aware, that is to do with lineage. Males have more of a power structure. Most families have a power structure. And there's a preference towards males, and that happens all over the world. By the way, that's all over the world, right? So this is a cultural thing, and this is traditional. This is something that this was out of our spectrum. Now, nowadays, we're becoming a lot more empathetic, more understanding about equality and so on. And now it's starting to balance out, where we're starting to have a 50-50 kind of to some extent. Now, the problem is that biologically, there is a big difference between men and women, right? We know that men generally suffer a lot more in the world, as in, suicide rates. We tend to be exposed to a lot of more, chemicals in general, like in the workplace, a lot of danger. We don't, hunt, for example. We don't go to war, but some of us might, for example, work in constructions and just fall off just because of the low level risk for that job. Obviously, we know like heart attacks, strokes tend to, I'm not sure with the statistics, but stroke is related. People who have stroke tend to have high levels of stress. My dad had a stroke. Which we know generally which is related to mental health, by the way. We know that men have issues with mental health. Obviously, we know suicide is a massive one.
Men die soon.
Generally die sooner, right? And then obviously the females live longer, generally, right? So obviously we know that statistically that men tend to die a lot sooner than their
So your
halves.
argument, if I may interrupt you here, is that polygamy is a necessity. And it's a system that works, and if it does work, inevitably we'll have a lot more single people or people doing unlawful acts under the guise of Islam.
Yeah, it's more to do with, if the husband dies at an early age, right? Because obviously he's going to provide and so on. Then the woman's left by herself with a child potentially.
But my argument is, why can't she go and marry a man that just takes her for herself, as opposed to, does she have to? Are you saying because she's widowed and she's got a child that she's lesser valued than a normal woman, and then she has to by default marry someone that's already married?
Not necessarily, right? Because that's not. It's a woman has a choice to do whatever she wants, right? If she wants to remarry or not remarry, it's up to her, right? But Islam has because obviously you have to realize, right? When you have children, right? Especially divorcees who have children, for example, right? One of the biggest factors they always think about is how they can sustain their child's livelihood, right? And education and so on, right? And it's very hard to do both at the same time, as in maintain working to earn a living for the child and also rearing the children. So that in that regard, Islam has permitted has advised the woman to go get another husband, right? So he can help her in that regard, right? Now, in this country, we really know it's completely different, right? Because in the country, you kind of don't need a man, in honesty.
You don't know.
You don't, right? Yeah. And we also know the government gives benefits, child maintenance benefits, and all these, like literally all these benefits.
The state will look after you.
Right? And they'll just say they're happy to take it under their wing.
And that reinforces my point. Yeah. We are living in a country where, firstly, there is no need for it because there are protections in place. Yeah. And secondly, we've been brought up in a way in which it's almost bizarre. Yeah. It's almost bizarre. Don't get me wrong. I know people that have been married twice. Yeah. But from our generation, I don't think many, and some do. And you got these, to be fair, and again, I'm not being biased here. At the end of the day, I'd like to say that men dream about having multiple wives, right? It's within our nature. Wives or women, rather. Yeah. If you're Muslim, would say wives, right? Because the latter is forbidden. Being married multiple times, this is the contradiction, actually. And so a lot of men in this country, the term bigamy, they get married and not register it. What I found from my personal experience is attributed to masculinity. I'm taking care of 2 or 3 wives. Yeah. But what I found is these men that do get married multiple times, and more often than not, they're weird themselves and they get married to weirdos.
Yeah.
Because we don't, a normal girl wouldn't accept it, generally speaking.
Yeah.
Obviously, there are exceptions, right? I found that he's not quite masculine because he's broke.
Yeah.
And the women that he's married are weird.
Yeah.
Tell me tell me otherwise.
Yeah, I think there's a lack of transparency with this scene specifically. I'm obviously,
Even the people that espouse getting married multiple times, most of them are broke.
no, it is true.
So how does that work in second and developing countries?
Yeah.
It's a proper masculine thing. I'm
Yeah.
taking care and the X, Y, and Z, and you have to be. But why is it in the West that it's the weirdos that get married a couple of times to other weirdos?
There's a big issue here in terms of wealth. I just want to go through it quickly, because we all know people in countries like Bangladesh, India, Malaysia, right? If you're a rich person, you could easily afford the lifestyle for multiple wives, right?
Yeah.
Well, if you try to take that same concept back in the UK, where the wealth status is completely different, the kind of structure is completely different. You know, you might be considered very rich in Malaysia and Bangladesh, for example, but over here you'd be probably considered average, pretty much in the UK. So I think that is one area that we need to kind of just highlight as well, right? Because obviously you might be considered rich to some extent back home, but over here you might not necessarily. So. But I was going to also say to you specifically, as you've highlighted, right, there are people who are doing a mad one and, literally just marrying out people without any social status or any due diligence, really, with the partners. And to be honest, I can't really advise too much about that area, because to be honest, that's your responsibility as a partner. If you're a woman, you should be doing your due diligence on that kind of guy, right? And it's the same thing for a man who's basically finding a partner.
No, it's like the point I'm making is you've got these Muslim boys, and a lot of my audience will understand this because they're old enough, right? They sort of read that you can get married 4 times, and they sort of die on that hill. I am going to get married 4 times. He hasn't even got a job.
Yeah, no, it's delusion. I mean, I'll be honest, right? Because in my personal opinion, and what I've seen from my way my family have done it, is that they've been completely transparent about it.
Let's go to your family, right? And this is going to get a little personal.
Yeah.
So your father married more than once.
Yeah.
And you are of 8 or 9 siblings?
Yeah, so I've got 4 half brothers. Well, sorry, 4 half siblings.
Okay. 4 half siblings, right? Now, what's the relationship between you and your half siblings?
It's not good.
It's not good. So isn't that also something that is a cause for concern?
Yeah, so the reason why is the real answer is because females hate each other. There's massive grudges against females.
So you're saying it's a blanket.
It's a massive competitive.
Wow.
It's a massive competitive thing going on with females. The reason why is when you are with a very high social status male, or anyone who has a man of value, for example, the natural instinct for females is to get everything. Spend your entire wealth, time, all with him. That is how all females are, right? So the idea is that if they can spend the most time, because obviously the idea for a woman is basically get her all to herself, right? That's why monogamy is encouraged over here. It's why you've got females saying you can't marry another woman, you can't marry another spouse, because they want everything to themselves, right? There is a level of narcissism here, by the way, right? Wow. We have to be very clear here, right? Because if you are a Muslim man and you're an imam or any royal family or someone who's just rich and knows his stance in the religion and his status in the world, right? He knows what value he brings, right? For a woman to come in and say, you've got to give this all to me, there is a massive level of narcissism over here, right? Because no man, right, who's worked hard for his whole life owes you anything, right? He does things because he wants to do it, right? Not because you are forcing it upon forcing it on his throat. That's the difference, right? And someone who actually, gives in to a woman who says, putting these clauses about, you can only have a single man is not a masculine man, in my opinion, right? Because as a man, there's a level of balls you need to take, right? And you just need to say it outright. I don't know. We'll see how it goes in the future. Because as part of a man, you're a risk taker.
Women are allowed to do this, and many shuyukh have said it, that they put a clause in the nikah contract that the man can't get married again, and they're well within their right to do so. But just on your previous point, are you saying men ain't ballsy enough, as you've put it, And they accept that because they accept it.
Well, there's a level of desperation here. We know that, right? Because, you know, men are getting older. They've got higher libidos. You know, they're struggling out here. Like no tomorrow. And like you said, right? You know, majority of guys.
Sorry.
You know, the majority of guys are not educated enough to match with some of these girls. We know that, right?
That's true.
I mean, look, I come from a top university.
Yeah.
There are more let's not say Bengalis, right? I'm just going to say Bengali. There are more educated females when I was in my course, right? And if you're going to tell me that hypergamy does not exist, I'll be honest, you're pretty deluded in my opinion, right? At these top universities, there's a lot more educated females, right? And at the same time, these educated females are saying, I'm not marrying a guy unless he's earning this amount of wealth, right? I don't know why you would think, I don't know in any mind of any woman would think that a high caliber man will see her as a first choice, because any man in general is looking for a fertile woman at first and looking for an obedient wife. That is just fundamental, right? Because, and we know if you're highly educated, and the statistics do prove it as well, right? The more educated you are, the more resistance, the more masculine you will become, because there are certain traits and skill sets you will accumulate when you're going to university.
Wow. So the more, and we're talking about women here, the more educated you are, the more resisting.
The more resistant, the more, because you're not going to be obedient, submissive. That's just naturally. I mean, think about it, right? When you go to the workplace, right, you're not going to be like, yes, I'm fine. No, I agree. No. Part of the workforce is being able to back yourself. Because, okay, I'll give you an example. I work in the science industry, right? When you put rationales behind, because obviously as part of a business, if you're doing a lot of project management or management or leadership roles, right, you need to be able to justify your rationale, right? And that skill set alone means you've got to back everything you say, right? And when you're working in these higher caliber jobs, you need to have a lot of confidence in yourself.
You're talking about both genders here.
Both genders, right? So when a female comes in and says, I'm going to start, you know, being this CEO and management level role, right? She's naturally going to be less submissive and obedient to you, because now there's a level of confidence in there that, you know, because she believes that she can boss around other men.
Wealth, confidence, yep, all of that matters. Yeah, right, psychologically it does, yeah, I agree.
Of course, because she now feels like she's more better than this man, fundamentally, right?
But naturally that woman would be looking for someone that's potentially, if we're talking about hypergamy here, someone that's a lot more well off.
Yeah, of course.
And there aren't many.
But of course. Yeah. But then my question is, do those men who do very well for them are looking for them?
No, probably not.
That's my point.
Actually, well, we can't generalize. Let's talk about you and I here, right?
Yeah, go on.
I wouldn't say I'm successful. I'm not sure how you describe yourself, but generally, I'm not looking for a successful woman. I'm looking for a mother. I'm looking for, you know, a homemaker, and I'm sure you'd say the same.
Yeah.
And I think most men, well, Muslim men anyway, would concur.
Yeah.
We're generalising here. It's not a blanket statement.
Yeah.
Very good. I mean, you made quite a few bold points. Just look at this. Explain the screen for us.
Okay, so over here, right? So this is not, I want to be very clear here, right? Some of these women who absolutely think that polygamy is everyone's doing polygamy. Every man's doing polygamy, right? Statistically, not every man is doing polygamy, right? There are so many average men who just are happy to settle with one woman, right? So let's just get that out right?
Didn't you criticise them though? The ones that are happy to settle
right?
one.
They do, right? But
Why do you think they're not risk takers? They're not ballsy enough.
Well, they're just not masculine enough. They're not men.
I've just told you, just a counter argument.
Yeah.
You might have the worldview, but from my experience, the guys that are getting married multiple times. They're usually in their 20s as well. They're getting married to 3-4 weirdos, and they're weird themselves.
Yeah.
They're not masculine either.
Yeah, but like I said, you've just said it yourself. They're not masculine themselves, right? I don't really consider those men who are hiding marriages and doing some mad ones on the side, right? Yeah. Let's ignore them, because to be honest, there's no point arguing with guys who don't have the balls. I don't really consider them men in general. Do you see what I'm saying?
Who are we talking about here? Sorry, I'm a bit lost in translation. Are you talking about men that are married once but don't have the balls, or don't have the courage to get married again?
So
because of the constraints put on them by women and society. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So there's a lot.
But surely, I mean, my counter argument, and I'm playing devil's advocate here, right? Is surely, if you're a man in this society and you're happily married with kids, and you're doing all right for yourself, and then you go and put a spanner in the works and you say, I want to get married again, and she doesn't let you, so you shut up and be quiet, or timid rather, surely that's a calculated move because
No.
she'll take everything.
No.
And also,
So-
some men will say, and some of my friends will say, they don't need the aggro. They don't need, like you said, one woman for some men is enough. But I wouldn't argue and say they're not masculine enough.
So
They might not have the temperament
Yeah.
for multiple women. Because if you're saying women love talking and they need a lot of attention,
Yeah.
that's how I'd put it. And that's fine, right? If a man is struggling with just one wife and trying to please her emotional needs, how is he expected to please 2, 3, 4 women's emotional needs? I wouldn't say he's not masculine enough. I would just say he knows his capacity, and that's that.
So obviously that is subjective, whether a woman can be, so the idea that a woman has to be pleased in whatever way is subjective, right? Because, I'll tell you straight up, right? No woman will be satisfied with a man. No woman, right? Unless he's some trillionaire royal king where he's got everything in the world. She will still never be pleased with you, right? Now, Islamically, it says in the Quran, it gives that option to the man. It says, don't quote me with the exact quotes, but it says specifically, it directs the guide specifically to the man, whether he can actually do it himself or not, right? Now, there's a level of, self-reflection, humbleness, understanding your worth from a man, whether you can do it or not, right? So that is up to the man.
Do you think you have the capacity to get, obviously you're not married yet.
Yeah.
Hope you do get married. Hopefully.
Inshallah.
You're going on wealth and the courage and what have you. So are you currently in a position to take on more than one wife in this country?
So, I mean, are we talking financially, or are we just generally talking here?
We're talking about whatever things you've listed out. So finances, the fortitude, mental fortitude, everything really. So, and really say, no, we're going to roll up your sleeves.
Yeah.
I'm a man and I'm going to...
So I'll be honest, right? I can. And the reason why, I'll tell you this right now, right? It's simply is because I've got the infrastructure. And when I say infrastructure, I have stuff. Right? My mum has done it. As in, she was there, right?
When you say your mama?
As in, my mum was in polygamy, right?
Okay,
she's mum. And I've always asked my mum of her view on polygamy. Now, she did tell me it was because of her situation, right? And I completely get that. And I said to her, Islamically, you weren't against it. So she, in my view, she did something that's absolutely fine, right? Now, if you asked me if I would do it, I would say yes. And the reason why is because...
What, in this country?
In country,
England?
Right? I will do it in this country simply because I have seen my dad do it. I know the consequences, by the way, to having multiple
just quickly
wives.
outline the consequences, quickly.
So the consequences is, first of all, the laws are against you automatically, right? Because obviously it's legally not recognized. The second part of it is, as a man, because obviously most men, we all know that most men are destroyed in the court system, right? So they're going to try, because generally most men accumulate most of the wealth, they tend to target the men for their wealth.
What about the kids?
The kids, so usually it goes to the kids. So in terms
I'm talking about the relationship between the kids.
So, as in, can you just emphasize what you mean?
I mean, you and your half brothers and sisters.
So
how does that play out? Because when the old man passes away, that's when the knives are sharpened.
Yeah. No. So. Yeah. So with sibling feuds is a thing. It's a massive thing. You tend not to get it during the marriage because the dad's there and he keeps
when the old man dies.
When the dad dies, you see the true people of your siblings.
And again, this is like I said, I'm not really giving my opinion. I'm just thinking out loud and giving the opposing views.
Yeah.
So surely, from a monogamous perspective, and as a man, is it quite selfish that you want wives because you want wives, right? But is it not? Do you not see that if, for instance, you have 2 or 3 wives with multiple children from each wife, do you not foresee that when you pass, that those kids are going to be at each other's throats, and it must hurt you to see that your children, they're all your children, right, are at each other's throats purely because, there's jealousy and envy and territory and being territorial.
For sure. Let's be real here. We have to be true here, right? Feuds in family, specifically when the male figure dies, is a real thing.
Yeah.
And the one thing you'll realize is that when family members die, people show their true colors. It happens with the wives, it happens with the kids, it happens with... You'll even see it with cousins. That's how crazy it gets, right? part of a man is basically building an infrastructure where you know you've done your best, you've done it to your best of your ability. So what that means is that when you marry a partner, you need to have a system in place where there's least corruption in place. So what does that mean? So what that means so we know Islamically in countries like Bangladesh, for example, where I was brought I wasn't brought up, but where how my grandfathers, my ancestors did it. The way they did it is their marriage was built within a system, as in the Sharia law system, where all of the systems were in place, right? As in they didn't have to do much for all the assets to be divided to some extent. Now, obviously, you probably know, I know for a fact that Bangladesh is a corrupt country. We have to be outright here, right? You can just bribe people, things will happen, right? The part of the law itself, as in the Bangladesh, right? They still follow an element of Sharia law. So certain families will still agree that, you know, a portion of, a lot of the portion of the male assets tend to go to the male.
Let's forget about wealth distribution, okay?
Yeah.
We're not talking about Bangladesh, we're not talking about a developed country.
Yeah.
Before, can you just quickly explain this? I can do it, but can you explain the screen quickly?
Yeah. So, all right. So on the right-hand side of the map over here, this map just demonstrates how applicable polygamy is throughout the world, right? Now, as you can see, all of the blue-colored countries are basically countries where they're restricted or basically against it completely, right? And that's basically normal because it's there's liberalism, there's westernization, and you would expect it. Russia, China, Canada, USA, UK. I mean, you don't expect anything less, to be honest. But you also have to remember, they're not Muslim countries. So you would expect it,
so
right?
Yemen, 2%, what does that mean?
So 2% of the... So I'll just talk about this specific area. So around Asia and Africa is where the majority of polygamous marriages happen, right? So as you'd expect, most of these countries actually do have Muslims in there. And the majority of them do follow a lot more traditional Sharia, are more Sharia compliant.
Right.
Now over here, just around this area, what we call West Africa, Central Africa, they have an area called the Polygamy Belt. And basically this area within Africa is where polygamy is highest, basically. And that could be because of Sharia law, it could be because tradition, it could be culture.
Survival?
I mean, it could be survival, right? But we know a lot of those countries specifically, like Nigeria as being one of them, is a pretty wealthy country in Africa. Yep. There are probably a few more other countries that are in there as well that are a lot more wealthier.
With Pakistan, it says 1%. What does that mean?
So Pakistan, basically it just highlights that 1% of polygamy is registered in the whole population of Pakistan.
Well, that's not believable, is it?
Well, that's not believable, as you said, because as you said, right, there are people who do, I mean, that 1% reflects legally married people.
People that registered polygamy.
Right?
Yeah, so
then, but obviously,
this is inaccurate.
But it's not a total reflection, right? Because obviously this is from Pew Research Center. Yeah. We all know that marriage is not, you know, from an Islamic perspective, marriage is not dependent on announcing it to the government.
Just quickly, this column here, is polygamy moral?
Yeah. So as you can imagine, I mean, this side of the chart is you can pretty much just see how the views are specifically within the Western world. And
your beloved, well, you said corrupt Bangladesh, 32% find it morally acceptable and 56% don't.
We can go into it. We'll go into it a bit, right? We'll go into it a bit. On this side of the chart, what you can see is there's a lot more liberal countries that are morally against it. Yep. And over here on the bottom side, you've got countries that are for it. And that's as you would expect.
So we've got overwhelmingly African countries.
Are for it.
The entire African Africa are for it. Well,
for it.
Overwhelmingly.
Well, most of it is what. Yeah,
I'm surprised. You know, if you've got the Arabic countries.
So obviously, it's kind of normal because these are Muslim countries. These tend to be the majority Muslim, right? Even like if you look at Indonesia.
But why is it that? Actually, sorry. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So these Arab countries. It's still less than half. I'm surprised. I thought it'd be more.
It is because
I thought it'd be more because it happens more there than anywhere else in the world.
But that is because there's a clear indication why. Because Africa and Asia has a massive. Africa and Asia sees the West as a major influence, right? We all see because obviously we know the US, the UK has a major influence in a lot of these countries. Yeah. They are starting to adopt these certain laws and criteria.
Well, Africa clearly isn't, because if you have a look, Niger, Senegal, Mali, Cameroon, Nigeria, they overwhelmingly find polygamy morally acceptable. And if they find it morally acceptable, this is a social construct, right? In those countries, and particularly in the Middle East, and even in South Asia, including Afghanistan, I'm sure there's a lot of polygamous marriages up until this day that are happening, and I think I'd put it down to survival.
So there's an element of survival here, specifically within the African continent. Right? I definitely agree.
Yeah.
The one thing I can highlight is specifically around the Middle East and Asia is that there's a lot of British Western influence in there. Right. There's obviously trade, there's business happening, all of that, all those kind of aspects of it that have a contributing factor. So that kind of does explain why why these countries tend to be more, why they tend to think it's more okay, basically, right? But the reason why these countries is because there's less influence from Western part of the world.
And I think a wider question is perhaps to have another episode and just to analyse, in a polygamous society, is there more harmony? Is there more coherence? Do we have a more cohesive society as opposed to the one we live in now, where it's not, this definitely isn't a polygamous society, but divorce is rampant in our society, cheating is rampant in our society. So I mean, it's a balancing act, but primarily in this country, in the West, we live in a liberal system. Most people, you'd agree with me in this, find the act of polygamy barbaric. That's the way they... Would you say that's right? And I'm talking about not just Muslims, everyone, by and large, find it barbaric, in contrast to these countries here, where they act upon and implement it. Just quickly, what would your advice be to women? Because we're talking about this country, right? There's no point us debating about developed countries, because it happens there. We're talking about here, right?
Yeah.
The West, or England and Wales at large. Well, Britain anyway. What would be your advice to women that are single or married, and their husbands, or they're speaking to someone that is for polygamous marriages? What would your advice be to them?
So I will tell you the thought process of men, right? Now, to be blunt right here, if you find a partner who's average, and I'm going to be average, right? This guy is not, we're talking about men who are just average and just have a decent job.
What about if he's good looking?
Look, the definition of decent is good looking is obviously subjective. But my point is, right, I mean, Islamically, right, what most females should be going for are men who are providers and protectors. That's absolutely, what Islamically is advised. Absolutely, right? If he's good looking, that's good for him, I guess, right? But my point is that's not the basis, is what I'm trying to say. Women, if you are going for a man who is the prize, which, by the way, they are the prize, right? These high rich men are the prize. I just want to highlight that part. Right. They pick and choose who they want, right? Now, if you pick a man who's making, say, he's in the top 20%, right?
What does that mean?
So top 20% in the UK, this is obviously, a guesstimate, you can say.
Sure.
People who make above 70 grand.
That's peanuts.
That is considered medium to average, medium to high class in society.
I think you're broke if you make 70 grand a year.
It's subjective. I mean, at the end of the day, right, people work. Even billionaires work, I want to highlight, right? You can say subjective, that's fine.
I merely disagree on the point that making even £120,000 a year, if you're working for someone, how much is that? About £6,500 after tax? Now, whether you have a mortgage or you're renting privately, right? And you've got 2 kids, after you do your lavish lifestyle, from 2-3 holidays a year, paying your mortgage or your rent, you're left with nothing.
I mean, yes, that is the reality we have to...
are you really a high... Can you then... My argument is, in this society that we live in, on 120,000, and that's a lot of money. So I'm not saying it's not a lot of money on paper. So can you afford 2 or 3 wives?
So this country does not define what country was considered a high value man. I just want to let that clear. All right. Right? There are a lot of aspects and traits that high value men actually bring. Right? Wealth is not just one of them, by the way. Right? There are people who are billionaires, millionaires, and they still struggle to maintain one woman. I mean, let's be real here, right? If you look at some of the biggest actors in Hollywood, right? I mean, some of them last for like 2 years, and where do these men You know, where else are you going to get a high value man like that? Again,
What's your advice to the sisters that, because you're all, listen, this is what I've understood from you, right? We've done the geopolitics, so to speak, right? We've compared, and the comparative study between the West and the East, and it's different. You can't compare it, right? But you're saying, hypothetically speaking, because it is illegal in this country, right?
Yeah.
That you were for polygamous marriages in this country.
Yeah.
So, in order for that to happen, you need to persuade the women, surely.
Yeah.
Because
So,
it's a heart and mind thing. It's a mindset shift. So
Yeah.
what would you say to them?
So I want to be clear, right? For average men, you don't have to worry because average men are not looking for polygamous marriages.
That's quite offensive.
It is, but that is a fact.
That is very offensive.
But that is a fact. That is a fact, right? Because only average men are ambitious. Average men are ambitious. That's just a fact, right? Men of value are trying to build empires, colonies, have an army,
That's
right?
true.
Let's be real here. I mean,
but what kind of average men? What defines average?
Average people are people who lack being proactive in life.
Generally,
So
not just with wealth accumulation.
It's not to do with only just wealth accumulation,
Right.
Right. It is to do with health, fitness, keeping yourself
So it's the whole package.
It's the whole package, right? I want to highlight here, and I think I've told you this before, right? We talk about masculinity is a big topic in this area as well, right? Masculinity is not solely dependent on wealth. Actually, in fact, Islamically, wealth has got nothing to do with this masculinity, right? We know it during the Sahaba's time, the companions, we know some of them were very poor. Some of them were very rich, right? So masculinity has got nothing to do with wealth. I just want to highlight that.
I'm trying to get the pragmatic advice you're going to give to women, because I'll put another spanner in the work, right?
Okay, go.
You've got a house here, I don't know, somewhere in, I don't know, let's say Somerset. Nice house, you can pick it up for 600 grand, you know, a detached house. Now you've got married once and you want to get married again. Where are you keeping that wife? In the same house?
So look, as a man, you have the choice to do whatever you want. The Quran only states one thing. You should accommodate or provide and protect.
But we go
right?
by Quran and Sunnah. So.
And the Quran says, technically, all you need to do is to accommodate her. That's all it says.
What, under the same roof?
And it can be under the same roof.
I'm sure it can in terms of the specifics or theoretically, right? But which woman in this day and age, from this country, not an immigrant, right? From this country, the upbringing in this country, relatively well off, you know, relatively educated, relatively got a decent job, is going to accept to live in the same house as your other wife?
To be honest, that's fine.
What do you mean that's fine?
As in, if she doesn't want to live in that same house, that's fine.
Okay,
she can move on to find the next guy. It's that simple. I mean, look, we have to be real here, right?
Right.
We have to be real here, right? Like I said, men are the prize. These rich men are the prize.
Would you consider yourself the prize then?
I would consider myself someone who's got value.
Come on, a bit more oomph. Tell me, you got. Speak of your chest. You called average men, you know, like what they called, and there's a term for it, you know, lack of masculinity. So, own it. Say you're the prize. Say you're the prize.
It's not about calling yourself the prize,
no, because
right?
what you're saying is you've made a contrast between average men, mediocre men, that are happy with one wife and because they haven't got the balls or they haven't got the wealth or everything else, right? So, you know, by default, you're saying you're the prize.
So, I would consider myself above average, straight up, right? I can tell you right now, I've got way more life experience than most men over here. Well, I would say in the UK, specifically on this side of the spectrum, right? You are not going to get many men who come from a very rich background. You are not going to get many men who are educated, especially from a top 5 university. You are not going to get a man who actually you already know, I've come from a military background as well. And you are not going to get many men who have experienced life to the point where they have very low male figures in their family.
Ladies, just quickly, Shaki is single. If you are interested, please send your CV to info@silentmajority-podcast.com or message us on Instagram. This is the prize. Right. We'll end it there. I think it was a very interesting conversation. We found some answers, but I think all in all, it's a very important topic to discuss, and I'm sure we'll discuss it. Just on the grounds of equality, if there is any sisters or women that feel strongly against polygamy, please email us on info@silentmajority-podcast.com or reach out to us on Instagram. We're more than happy to have you on next week, provided we get a sister brave enough to come on and really air her views and obviously a rebuttal to this. Next week, if a sister does an email reach out to come on, we have an episode on red flags. So we'll have a divorced brother come on and talk about, after experiencing a divorce, what he stays away from. And he's going to inform the rest of us what the red flags in women are. And equally, after that, we'd like to have a sister on to talk about men with red flags. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Are you not entertained? Are you not